Hi everybody. Welcome back to another Q&A session with economics questions. So my name is Jeffrey. I'll be going over some commonly asked micro and macro questions, and then going over the answers and the answer of a previous tutor to see whether or not the previous tutor has gotten it correct. With that being said, we can just jump right into the first question. So the first question says, investment levels depend mainly on A, high levels of consumption in the economy, B, the rate of return on capital, C, tax incentives, or D, strong government demand. And so, sorry about that. So going over this, investment, what does investment refer to? It simply refers to when consumers or businesses are allocating money that will be used to invest in something that will create returns in future periods of time, right? So not the current period of time, but in future periods. So you're putting in a certain amount of money now and you're hoping to get more money out of it later. And so which one of these kind of options has the most to do with this idea of investments? So A says high levels of consumption in the economy. And so this is slightly referred to investments. The more people are consuming, which means they're spending on things in the current period, the less they can spend on investment in future periods. But it's not going to be one of the main factors. There's going to be another option here that's probably a little bit better. We can move to option B, which is the rate of return on capital. And this is going to be a much better indicator of investment levels, purely because it tells us how much more we can expect to get back from our investments in the current period when we wait until a future period. And so if we have a high rate of return on capital, we're going to have higher investment levels because people are more likely to set aside their resources now and invest their capital now in order to earn that high rate of return later. On the flip side, if there's a low rate of return on capital, then people are going to be less likely to put aside money and invest it now because they don't expect to make that much more from that money in the future. So the rate of return on capital is going to be one of those very key indicators for investment levels. C says tax incentives. Yes, like this is something that will affect investment levels a little bit. If you have greater tax incentives, then investments will probably have a higher rate of return. But at the end of the day, the rate of return is the most important thing. So C is not going to hit the nail on the head. And finally, D, strong government demand. And again, that's going to be slightly maybe related to investment levels, but not as much as the rate of return on capital. So B is going to be the best answer here. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. So the previous tutor said that the investment is defined as the expenditure made on the capital goods for the production of the goods and services in the economy. The main determinant of investment is the rate of return on capital and is the expected benefit from the investments. If the rate of return on capital is high, the investment levels will be high and vice versa. The rate of return is showing how effectively the company is turning the capital into profits. So the answer is B, the rate of return on capital. And that seems really good to me. Nothing that's really missing from the definition, so we're going to say good job and mark that as correct. Okay, next question. The next question says, in addition to raising money, the government imposes excise taxes to 1. Protect manufacturers of specific products, 2. Encourage the use of specific products, 3. Discourage the use of specific products, or 4. Protect consumers from specific products. So the first thing we have to understand here is, what is an excise tax? And so an excise tax is normally a tax that is levied on certain types or categories of goods or services. By definition, it is going to raise money because it's a tax. So anytime you buy an item that is being excise taxed, the price will include a portion of money that will go to the government, not to the seller. And that's the tax component. So that's what they mean by in addition to raising money. But what's the other reason? Why is this a tax imposed on certain goods? Why do you not impose it on all goods? That's a really big question with excise taxes. And the answer will tell us which one of these answer choices is correct. So A says to protect manufacturers of specific products. And so what they're thinking of here is not an excise tax, but a tariff or an import tax, right? Where you tax the importation of foreign goods. That's what you would do to protect manufacturers. That's not what we're doing here with excise taxes. 2 says encourage the use of specific products. But again, it's a tax. It's negative incentive, right? We're wanting people to basically consume less of this good by increasing the price of the good artificially with a tax. And so we're not encouraging use of specific products, we're discouraging use of those products. And that's where we get to answer choice 3, the discouraging of the use of specific products. This is the best answer here because that's the exact purpose of an excise tax. If you look at the goods that the government imposes excise taxes on, you have goods like cigarettes, you have goods like alcohol. These are goods that government believes there's a societal interest in discouraging their use. And so the excise tax is not saying you can't buy these goods. It's simply saying if you want to buy these goods, you're going to have to pay a little bit more money. And as the law of demand tells us, if we increase the price of certain goods, we're going to decrease the quantity demanded, right? So that's the goal of an excise tax. So 3 is the best answer here, but let's take a look at question 4 just to make sure. And 4 says protect consumers from specific products, but again, it's not a mandate of that you stop using specific products. It's not a regulation that bans specific products. It's merely a negative incentive to artificially inflate the price so that the quantity demanded goes down. So discourage is a better word to use here. And so 3 is going to be the right answer. So let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. Previous tutor also said 3, and they say that an excise tax is a type of indirect tax that is levied on specific goods at the time of manufacturing. An excise duty is levied on a narrow range of goods, and the burden is transferred by the sellers to buyers of the goods. It is a heavy proportion of the market price of the goods. Excise duties are imposed by the government to discourage the use of specific goods, such as the imposition of excise duty on tobacco or alcohol. It is often used as a deterrent to the use of hazardous substances such as drugs and/or to prevent environmental damage by making environmentally harmful activities expensive, such as the use of fossil fuels. And so the last example here, an excise tax on fossil fuels, is again a better idea of why 3 is a better answer than 4, right? You're not protecting consumers from fossil fuels, you're protecting the environment from fossil fuels. And so 4 is a little bit narrower of a way of viewing excise taxes than the way it's actually implemented in real life. So 3 is the best answer here. This is a great answer. I want to say, good job, good answer. And we can mark that as correct. Let's move on to the next question. All right, we've got a lot here, so let's break this down. Okay, number 1, the law of demand states that as the price of a good rises, blank happens. A, buyers purchase more of the good because the price of the substitute has risen. B, buyers purchase less of the good because their real income decreases with an increase in price. C, buyers purchase more of the good because they expect prices to be even higher in the future. Or D, buyers purchase less of the good because they expect the prices to fall in the future. So in general, we know that the law of demand tells us that as the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded is going to go down, right? And so we know right off the bat that A and C are going to be incorrect. A says buyers are going to purchase more, and C also says that buyers are going to purchase more. We're not going to deal with those. So it's just B and D. And the second differentiating factor between these two answer choices is the rationale for why buyers are purchasing less, right? We know that buyers will purchase less, but why are they purchasing less? B says it's because real income is decreasing with an increase in price, and D says it's because they expect prices to fall in the future. And B is going to be much closer to a rationale for why buyers are purchasing less than D. This is what we would kind of refer to as an income effect or a wealth effect. Basically, the idea that increase in price decreases the purchasing power of buyers, and purchasing power can be synonymous to real income. That if your nominal income is staying the same, you earn $10,000 a year. If prices goes up, even though the amount you're making, $10,000, doesn't change, the amount of things you can buy with your income has decreased. You might have been able to buy 1,000 goods that cost $10 each, and now the price of that good rises to 20. Now you can only buy 500 of those goods, right? So there's this trade-off or this inverse effect on your real income when prices goes up. And so obviously, if your real income is going down, you're not going to be able to buy as much. D talks about expectation of prices in the future, but again, we know that this is more so a demand determinant rather than a law of demand explanation, right? A demand determinant is something that would shift the entire curve. Price expectations for the future are something that shift the quantity demanded at all price levels. It's not a reflection of the relationship between prices and quantity demanded. B gets that relationship correctly. So the correct answer here is going to be B. Let's take a look at the previous answer, and they also pick B. Great. Question 2. A movement along a demand curve can be attributed to a change in A, the quantity demanded of a good, B, the demand for a good, C, the substitution effect of consuming a good, or D, the opportunity cost of producing a good. So the correct answer here is going to be A, the quantity demanded of a good. And what we really have to understand here is the difference between a movement along a demand curve, which is what this question is talking about, versus a shift in demand, or a shift of the demand curve, which is the opposite or the counter example to this movement. A movement is something that can only occur when there's a price change, and it means that we're reflecting basically the inverse nature of the law of demand. That as prices goes up, quantity demanded goes down. So that's a movement. If we drew it out, it would be the exact same graph. Meanwhile, you have our demand determinants, as I was talking about in the previous question, which are saying it's not a movement, it's not that price is changing, it's that quantity demanded at every price level is changing. And that's going to be something that is affected by an external factor unrelated to price change. So when we have a movement, it's just price change leading to quantity demanded changing, and with a shift, it's going to be something that's not price causing a change in the demand curve. So A is going to be the correct answer here. And the previous year also picked A. Great. 3. If we say that demand for a good has increased, we mean that there has been A, leftward shift of the demand curve, B, a rightward shift of the demand curve, C, a leftward movement along the demand curve, or D, a rightward movement along the demand curve. Okay, so again, here we're seeing that distinction between a movement of the demand curve and a shift of the demand curve. Now generally, when we say that demand for a good has increased, if there's no specific reference to there being a movement, then increasing demand refers to a shift of demand, right? So that'll immediately eliminate answer choices C and D, and we're left with A and B. And A is saying it's a leftward shift, and B is saying it's a rightward shift. Well, which one is it? Well, we're saying that demand for a good has increased. What it tells us is that the quantity demanded of a good has gone up at every single price level. Let's try and draw this out on this graph here. If we have our demand curve here, we're saying that at every price level, quantity demand has gone up. So at this arbitrary price level here, we used to have this much quantity demanded, and we're saying it's going to be more now, so maybe it goes to here, right? This is the increase in quantity demanded. And at this arbitrary price level here, demand used to be at this level, and now it's over here. So we do have for every demand curve, we're going to get a new demand curve that looks something like this, and that is a rightward shift. So if we just drew it out, or we imagine in our heads, we would know that the correct answer here is going to be B. If we say that demand for a good has increased, we mean that there has been a rightward shift of the demand curve. And the previous tutor says D, although they think the words they used a rightward movement along the demand curve. So that would be incorrect, right? So if we say that there's been a rightward shift of the demand curve, not a rightward movement, right? A rightward movement would simply be something like moving from this point to this point, right? That's not what's going on here. Okay, let's go to question 4. Which of the following will cause the demand curve for a normal good to shift to a right? A, an increase in the price. B, let me make some new slides here. Don't want that. Okay, well, we'll do that later. Which of the following will cause the demand curve for a normal good to shift to the right? A, an increase in the price of a complementary good. B, a decrease in income. C, a decrease in the price of the good. Or D, an increase in the price of a substitute good. So we're saying it's going to cause a shift to the right. We're saying at every price level, the quantity demand has gone up. Okay. What are demand determinants that are listed here? A says there's going to be an increase in the price of a complementary good. What is a complementary good? They're basically two goods that are bought hand in hand. They're bought together, right? So you think of bread and butter, cookies and milk, toothbrush and toothpaste, right? They're goods that you buy together. And so if the demand for one of these goods goes up, then the demand for both goods is probably going to go up. An increase in the price of a complementary good, however, is going to decrease the quantity demanded of that good, right? A higher price, lower quantity demanded. If people are buying less of your complementary good, they're also going to buy less of this good as well. And so this is going to be a leftward shift in the demand curve, not a rightward shift. So A is not going to be correct. B says a decrease in income. Again, this is going to be a leftward shift, not a rightward shift. If people have less disposable income, they're less likely to be purchasing or consuming goods. There's going to be a decrease in consumption across the board. So B is not going to be correct. C says a decrease in the price of the good. Again, this is this distinction between a movement and a shift again, right? A decrease in the price of a good is what causes there to be a movement to the right, not a shift to the right. So C is going to be incorrect as well. And finally, we're left with D, an increase in the price of a substitute good. And what is a substitute good? They're basically two goods which are interchangeable. You can think of people who might just want some type of citrus fruit. They don't care if it's grapefruit or oranges, right? People who want some type of beverage. They don't care if it's Coke or Pepsi. And so these are substitute goods where if I have one, I don't need the other. If there's an increase in the price of your substitute good, that means people are buying less of that good, right? Higher price, lower quantity demanded. People buy less of that good, they're going to shift over to their substitute good, which is this good, and that's going to cause you to have higher demand at every price level. That is going to be our rightward shift that we're looking for in this question. So the answer to question number 4, which of the following will cause the demand curve for a normal good to shift to the right? The answer choice is D, an increase in the price of a substitute good. Let's take a look at the other answer choices. 4 says, which of the following will cause the demand curve for a normal good to shift to the right? Answer choice is D. Great. Let's go to 5. Which of the following best defines supply? A, the amount of a good that is produced at the least possible cost, other things constant. B, the amount of good that producers are willing and able to sell at each possible price, other things constant. C, the amount of a good that consumers want to buy at different income levels. Or D, the amount of a good that producers want to sell at a fixed price. Well, we know that the law of supply is going to define the supply curve. And the law of supply tells us that as price goes up, quantity supplied goes up because producers are able to earn more money off of their goods and they're going to be more motivated to produce those goods. Let's compare that law of supply definition to our understanding in the answer choices. A says that the amount of a good that is produced at the least possible cost, other things constant. So this is talking about like lowering like marginal cost, I believe, or something like that. And it's not really the definitions for supply, right? Suppliers aren't really concerned about producing something at the least possible cost, although that would be helpful. What they're really concerned about is how much are they going to sell given how much they can earn in revenue for their goods. So A is not going to get that relationship entirely correct. B says the amount of a good that producers are willing and able to sell at each possible price, other things constant, and this is much better of a definition, right? Given a price level, how much are producers willing to manufacture or produce, right? Holding other things constant. That's a much more all-encompassing answer. So we're pretty happy with that one. Let's go to C and D just to make sure. C said the amount of good that consumers want to buy at different income levels. Supply is completely on the producer side, has nothing to do with the consumer, so we're not going to be worried about this answer choice. And finally, D, the amount of a good that producers want to sell at a fixed price. And so the thing with the supply curve is just like the demand curve, price is flexible. It's the only thing that's flexible. We hold everything except for price to be fixed, right? And so to say that you want a fixed price is completely counterintuitive to our understanding of the supply curve and supply side itself. So B is going to be the correct answer here. The amount of the good that producers are willing and able to sell at each possible price, other things constant. Let's take a look at the other answer choices. They said D, the amount of the good that producers want to sell at a fixed price, and so that's going to be incorrect. Why don't we take this chance to kind of address some of the errors we found. So we know 3 was wrong, we know 5 is wrong. So for 3 we said correct answer is B. And for 3 it was that when we say the demand has increased for a good, we mean that quantity demanded has increased for every price level. This is synonymous to a rightward shift in demand. And then for 5, we said that the correct answer is, I believe B as well, right? Yes, B as well. Correct answer is B. Supply refers to how much producers are willing to produce or sell at various price levels, holding all else constant. And that's going to be that. Okay, so let's go to 6 then. The market supply curve of a particular product indicates the total quantities A that are actually sold during a given time period, B that sellers are willing to offer for sale at a fixed price, C that buyers are willing to purchase at alternative prices, or D that sellers are willing and able to offer at alternative prices. And so again, just like we talked about with number 5, supply curve tells us the relationship between price level and quantity supplied. A says how much is actually sold, but again, it's a spectrum, right? How much is being offered and sold, that's an interaction between the demand curve and supply curve, interaction of what the price level is. So it's not going to be what the market supply curve itself really captures. B says that sellers are willing to offer for sale at a fixed price. And again, we said the price is not fixed, it's floating, it's variable, right? Price is the only thing that can vary on the supply curve because it's on the y-axis, right? And so sellers are willing to offer and sell at various price levels would be a better answer here. A fixed price would make this the wrong answer. C says that buyers are willing to purchase at alternative prices. And again, that's more so the demand curve, that's the market demand curve. How much are consumers willing to buy given a certain price, or various prices? And finally, we're left with D, that sellers are willing and able to offer at alternative prices. This is a much better answer. It fits our understanding of the law of supply, and it tells us that price is variable, and so D is going to be the correct answer here. Let's go to 6, and they said that B, that sellers are willing to offer for sale at a fixed price. So again, we're going to correct that answer here. Correct answer is D. Supply curve shows us the relationship between price and quantity supplied. Price is variable, not fixed, because it's on the y-axis of the supply curve graph. Okay, 7. No, we don't know if 7 would be wrong yet. 7 says, when quantity demanded of a good exceeds the quantity supplied at the prevailing market price, what happens? A says that the demand curve shifts rightward until the surplus is eliminated. B says the market is in equilibrium. C says the price of the good will tend to increase, and D says the price of the good will decrease. And so, let's set up this scenario, right? We're dealing with a situation where quantity demand, we're dealing with a market. We have demand, we have supply, right? The quantity demand of a good exceeds the quantity supplied. That must mean that price is around here, right? Quantity demand is here, and that exceeds quantity supplied. this is what we call a shortage, right? This is how much at this price level, let's call it P. At price level P, the quantity supplied is at this level, right here, and there's QD people who want to buy that good. And so there's going to be this distance of quantity where people are willing to buy at this price level, but there's nobody willing to sell, and so these people don't get the good. And so we can think of this as rent control, for example, keeping the price of rent low and capping at a certain price. There's only so many people who are willing to rent. Everybody wants to have cheap rent. Not everybody's going to get an apartment, right? And so this is our price, our shortage, our shortage situation, right? So what occurs, like assuming it's not like a price control, like rent control, right? Assuming this is just where it is right now, what's happening here? A says what will happen is that the demand curve shifts rightward until the surplus is eliminated. First of all, it's not a surplus, right? It's a shortage, so we don't know what's wrong. Second of all, we know that if anything, the demand curve needs to shift to the left in order to match quantity supply and quantity demanded. But third, we don't expect demand to shift whatsoever. This is still a problem of price. The only thing that's changing here is price. We don't expect that the solution is going to have to do with a shift in the curve. The solution has to do with a shift in price. So A is going to be incorrect. B says the market is in equilibrium. That's just false, right? Equilibrium would be if we were producing at this point right here at the intersection of supply and demand, where quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. So B is not correct. C says that the price of the good will tend to increase. Now this is going to be on the right track, right? What is the problem here? Price is too low, so there's a shortage. If in this situation, natural response is that a seller is going to say, hold on a minute, I've still got this many people who are willing to buy a good, and so far they can't buy one. I can afford to charge a little bit more for my good, and there will still be a decent amount of people who want to buy my good. So that's going to cause there to be upward pressure on price, right? Okay, so the seller does that, and now the price is a little bit higher. But there's still a shortage, and so the motivation to increase your price still exists because people are still going to buy it. And so you keep on increasing the price, and the upward pressure on price continues until you reach this point right here, the equilibrium, right? Where quantity supply is equal to quantity demanded. Now pressure is gone. There's no more incentive to continue to increase price because if you increase price, nobody else is going to be there to buy it. It's going to be contributing to surplus. And so the upward pressure exists until the price level reaches equilibrium. That's what C is going to be referring to when it says the price of the good will tend to increase. And that's going to be the correct answer. We can quickly look at D. D says the price of the good will decrease. That's just the opposite direction of progress in this market. So it's going to be incorrect. C is the correct answer here. Let's move on to the previous tutor's answer. And 7 previous tutors said C as well. Now let's go to 8. Shortage of textbooks is most likely to cause. Okay, so we got to deal with shortage now. What's going on here? Where's my slide? I see, I pressed the slide. My bad. What's going on here? Okay. 8 says a shortage of textbooks is most likely to cause A, an increase in the price of textbooks, B, a decrease in the supply of textbooks, C, a decrease in the price of paper, or D, an increase in the cost of printing. Let's break this down. What does a shortage of textbook look like? Go to the demand curve. That's not bad. Supply curve. A shortage is. Why did I draw any graph? Let's. It's the same. This is still a shortage. Okay. My bad, guys. We're still dealing with shortage. What is going to happen here if this is a shortage in the textbook market, the high quantity demand of textbooks, low quantity supplied? A says increase in the price of textbooks. That seems to agree with what we talked about. Number 7, it seems to be almost the same question. B says a decrease in the supply of textbooks. We said that we don't expect there to be any shifts in either the supply or demand curve. This is a price problem, not a determinant problem. C says a decrease in the price of paper. That seems to be like a tertiary market or secondary market issue. That's not really what's going to directly happen in this market. And D says the increase in the cost of printing. Again, it's a tertiary market, not a primary market effect. And A is going to be correct, increase the price of textbooks for the same rationale that we had for question 7. There's going to be an upward pressure on the price in order to, as sellers recognize that there's a money-making opportunity to increase the price and fulfill some of the demand that is given by a shortage. And so A is going to be answer choice A. Let's go to the previous tutor's answer, and they also said A. Great. Okay, let's go to the 9. The most important characteristic of the equilibrium price is that it A, maximizes the quantity demanded, B, clears the market, leaving either a surplus or a shortage, C, minimizes the quantity demanded, or D, guarantees that producers earn profit. So equilibrium price is that price in which, we can go back to this graph probably. Equilibrium price is ignore shortage stuff. Equilibrium price is this intersection of supply and demand, and it's a point in which quantity supply is equal to quantity demand. There's no surplus, there's no shortage. Where does that fit best with here? And the answer is B. There's no surplus, there's no shortage. You're clearing the market exactly. It's perfectly in equilibrium. That is what equilibrium refers to. Everything else is incorrect. Maximizing or minimizing quantity demanded. That would imply that you would set price as high as possible so you can minimize the quantity demanded, or as low as possible, and everything's free so you can maximize quantity demanded. That's not what equilibrium is, right? Equilibrium has to do with this interaction of supply and demand. So B is the correct answer here. Yes, B. B is the correct answer here, and the correct answer by the previous tutor is also B. Great. 10. If both demand and supply increase in the market that is initially in equilibrium, price will A, increase only if demand increases more than supply, B, increase only if supply increases more than demand, C, remain unchanged while quantity will increase, or D, remain unchanged while quantity will decrease. So let's take a look at this question. So we draw this out, we've got equilibrium and demand curve, we've got a supply curve. Okay, so both demand and supply increase, they're both shifting to the right. Let's start with demand. Rightward shift, we draw like this, and we're only caring about price, right? Price, what's going to happen to price? Okay, well, price has gone up, right? We started at this point here, we're moving up to this point here. The price is going up for this demand shift. Okay, so now what happens if the supply is increasing? Let's take a look. So supply rightward shift is going to look something like this. Right, this is our new supply curve. What's happened to the price? Well, clearly price is going down, right? We were initially at this equilibrium point, and now we will be at this equilibrium point, holding demand constant, right? We will be at this equilibrium price. So there's a downward pressure on price when the supply curve shifts. All right, so we now know that they're opposite direction, opposite pressures on price, right? The demand shift to the right causes price to go up. The supply shift on the supply shift to the right causes the price to go down. So how does this inform our answer? So A says it will increase only if demand increases more than supply. And this seems to be remarkably, this seems to be the right answer, right? If we say that demand is going to go up, the only way that, the price will go up, the only way that happens is if the demand effect on price is greater than the supply effect, right? The demand effect is the positive pressure. We're saying that price is overall going to go up, then it must mean that demand has increased by more than supply. The effect of demand has been more than supply, right? So A could be the correct answer. Let's check the other answers. B says increase only supply, increase more than demand. We just established that if you want to increase price, then it has to be the demand that is the dominant effect, not the supply. C says remains unchanged while quantity will increase, and it says remain unchanged while quantity will increase. And so, in that sense, when we're dealing with this supply and demand effect, it's easy to see in our model that maybe if we drew it exactly the way that we drew it, that price is going to remain the same. But we have to know that this is just like an abstract model, right? We are not characterizing that this is the only way a supply and demand increase will happen in the market. It's possible that supply will increase by a little bit, demand will increase by a lot, or vice versa. And so, C is going to be incorrect. We can't say for sure that price will remain unchanged. And finally, D, same thing. We can't say for sure that the price will remain unchanged while quantity will increase, or sorry, will decrease. So the correct answer here is going to be A, and the previous year's answer is also A. So we've marked 3 questions here as incorrect, 3, 5, and 6. But otherwise, the previous year got it pretty good. So we'll mark this as incorrect so that these can be reviewed, and we can move on to the next question. Sorry, I'm just trying to fix the lighting. Okay, next question is explain why the demand curve for the market is downward sloping but is horizontal or completely elastic for an individual firm. Now, this is actually a really good question. So let's take a look. So on the one hand, we have a perfectly competitive market, which looks like this. And on the other hand, we have our perfectly competitive firm, right? Sorry, that's not correct. So supply, and then we have demand is horizontal. Okay. And then we can draw this dotted line over. Okay, so they're the same price level, right? All at P star. So the question is, why is it that the market has a downward sloping demand curve, called this the market graph, and why is it that the firm graph has a horizontal demand curve? And the answer is basically the scale, right? The market demand curve is made up of a sum total, the aggregate total of all firms in this market, right? You, at every price level, if you added up how much each firm makes, how many firms would, how much would each firm produce, right? And so it's downward sloping because there's the inverse, the law of demand tells us that as price goes up, quantity demanded is going to go down. And so, so in that sense, we know that as price, sorry, ignore what I said about firms. Does not have anything to do with firms. I could just supply. The market demand curve is saying if you sum up the total of all the consumers in the market at every price level, how much would those consumers purchase, right? And so at a higher price level, we expect all the consumers purchase less. At a lower price level, we assume all the producers would purchase more, and that's that, right? However, the thing is that when we have a what's it called? A firm level. The firms in a perfectly competitive market are price takers, right? They don't have an option to set the demand, right? They have perfectly elastic demand. What that means is that whatever the equilibrium price is in the market, that's the price that each firm has to deal with. Because each firm is so small and so interchangeable with other firms that there's no need, there's no power or market power to influence the demand curve at all, or the price level at all, right? So we're price takers, not price setters. And that's the difference between the two. The market has the aggregate total of all consumption in the market, and that's going to be similar to the law of demand, what the law of demand tells us the demand will look like. And the firm, because it's so small and has so little market power, can only take the price that is set. It cannot set the price itself. And so that's the main difference between the two. Let's take a look at the previous year's answer. Previous year says that the demand curve is horizontal or completely elastic for an individual firm, because an individual firm does not have any effect on the market price of the good. A firm raises its price, and so will go to one of the other firms, which sells the exact same good for a lower price. A firm also has no incentive to lower its price because it can already sell as many units of its goods as it wants for a market price. Lowering the price will not attract any more customers, only allow the firm to clear its inventory quicker. On the other hand, for the market, normal law of demand holds because price affects the demand of the market inversely. Great, so they explained it really well. Nothing's really out there. And we can mark this as correct. Next question says, your friend wants to open a clothing shop. A necessary capital resource is A, place to open the shop. B, knowledgeable fashion manager. C, license to conduct business. Or D, highway billboard for advertising. So there's two things that we want to consider here. One is necessary, and two is capital resource. Necessary means it's essential, right? You have to have this in order to open this clothing shop. And capital resource refers to the type of resource we're doing. Capital is physical space, some sort of good that is used to further produce additional goods or services. And so that's what we're dealing with. We're not necessarily dealing with human capital. We're not dealing with legal resources and stuff like that, right? So let's go down the line. A says place to open the shop. And right off the bat, that seems really good. If you want to open a clothing shop, you need to have a place to open it. If you don't have a place to open it, you can't open a clothing shop, right? We're going to assume it's like brick and mortar shop, not like an online shop. So that's necessary. And it's also a capital resource, right? Land, real estate, that's capital, right? That's something that we use to further produce additional goods and services. And so it seems to fulfill both of the criteria given to us in the question. Let's just go down the line to make sure A is the correct answer. B says a knowledgeable fashion manager. First of all, is it necessary? No. We'd like to have a knowledgeable fashion manager, of course, but you don't need to have one to open a clothing shop. And second, it's not a capital resource, that's a human resource, right? That's somebody who is knowledgeable, someone who has human capital. And so that's not capital resource. C says license to conduct business. It's a legal requirement, so it's a necessity, but it's not a capital resource. A license is not something that we use to produce future goods and further goods and services, right? So C is going to be incorrect. And finally, D, highway billboard for advertising. This is going to be again, this is going to be something that's not necessary, right? You don't need a highway billboard to advertise. We would like to have one, but that's not something that's necessary. It is a capital resource, however, something that you can use to kind of promote your service and basically allow you to produce more of the good and service. So A is going to be the correct answer here. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. Previous tutor says that in economics, the production of anything depends on factors of production like labor, capital, land, etc. We can also say that some of the resources are necessary for the production of a particular good, like for some goods, capital investment, and for some, labor is necessary. The capital resource is a type of resource which is used to further produce goods and services like tools, buildings, machinery, etc. In question, it is said that one of our friends wants to open a clothing shop, then the necessary capital resource is a place to open that shop. Therefore, option A is the correct answer. And so that's pretty good. And so we're going to mark that as correct. Next question says, when compared to a mixed market economy, a command economy typically has 1, more government control over production, 2, more private ownership, 3, strong consumer buying power, or 4, a greater chance for a high income. So what's the difference between the two? What's mixed market? What's command economy? Mixed market means that there's both private and public presence in the economy. And it's very similar to most economies today, right? Most economies are mixed market. You have your free market in the private sector, which is determined by supply and demand pressures, capitalism, etc. And then you have the part that's public sector run by the government, where the government regulates what happens in those industries, and that's more like public goods or utilities. And so that's the mixed market economy. A command economy is the extreme of one of the halves of the mixed market, the public half. It basically says that everything is public. There is no private sector. The government controls all the resources. The government tells everybody in the economy what to do, what the factors of production are going to be, what to produce, where you work. And so that command economy means central control over all aspects of the economy. It's fairly theoretical. I don't think there's any economy that exists that we would classify as a command economy. Only economies that might be more similar to a command economy than a mixed market economy, right? So a command economy then, which one of these definitions fits the best? Which one of these answer choices fits the definition the best? One says more government control over production. That already seems really good as an answer. A command economy definitely has more government control over production. B says more private ownership. Again, that's going to be the flip side. We're talking about a market economy, not a mixed market economy, so it's not a command economy. 3 says strong consumer buying power. Again, it doesn't seem really relevant to the market structure, how strong consumer buying power is. And 4, a greater chance for a high income. I don't know exactly what the case would be, but I would probably assume, right, that mixed market economy gives you a greater chance for high income because there's more market forces available where you could profit more due to some sort of market externality, right? But a command economy would probably have more moderated income levels. But 1 is going to be the correct answer here by far, that a command economy typically has more government control over production than a mixed market economy. So let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. And the previous tutor said 1 as well. And they said that a mixed economy is an economic system that promotes a free enterprise with some amount of government intervention in the private market for the protection of common welfare. It resembles both a command and a free market economy. Great. A command economy, on the other hand, is an economic system in which the state is the absolute decision-making authority for production and investment actions. Means of production and resources are publicly owned, private enterprise is prohibited, and prices in the market are determined by the government. A command economy is characterized by a greater degree of government control over production and investments than a mixed market economy, where the government intervenes only as a regulatory and/or guiding authority and only undertakes certain production activities. Okay. Yeah, that's right. There's nothing there that I would really like to add. So good answer. And we can mark that as correct. All right. Next says, what role does competition play in international trade? 1 says it results in higher prices. 2 says it drives down prices for consumers. 3 says it discourages imports. And 4 says it does away with the need for investment. So this is something that ties really well into this idea of globalization, where there's no such thing as just a domestic economy. Or a domestic market. You have the global market now. Excuse me. And so, in that sense, it promotes international competition as well, right? Firms that used to only have to produce to compete against other firms in their domestic economy now have to compete against firms that exist in other countries. And so we know that as competition increases, there's less and less, there's more and more motivation to beat other people. And basically one way you can beat other competitors is to price them out. And so that results in lower prices. And so that's one of the big things that happens with the role of competition in international trade. Let's take a look at the answer choices. A says it results in higher prices. Again, we're talking about competition. Most of the time, it's competition that's driving down prices. You can imagine scenarios that we know that in a monopoly or an oligopoly market or a monopolistically competitive market, the prices are higher than we expect in perfect competition, where we say the difference is a monopoly has one firm and a perfectly competitive market has a theoretically infinite number of firms or a massive amount of firms for maximum competition, right? So it's not going to drive up prices, it's going to drive down prices. And that's exactly what 2 says. That is going to drive down prices for consumers. So that's going to match up really well. Let's take a look at the other ones just to make sure. 3 says it discourages imports. That's incorrect. If we have more global competitors, then it's more likely we discover global competitors that we would like more or are pricing at a lower point. That's going to increase imports, not decrease, right? So imports is a byproduct of international trade. And finally, 4, it does away with the need for investment. And that's not true, right? International trade, if anything, encourages investment because now we don't just have domestic investment, we also have foreign investment. Money from other countries flowing into our economy in order to invest in things that are happening here. And so that's not going to be correct as well. So it really seems that 2 is the best answer here, that the role that competition plays in international trade is to drive down prices for consumers. And so that's exactly what we're going to find ourselves saying. 2 says, the previous tutor also said 2, and they said that one of the greatest benefits of competition which arises in international trade is the derived reduction in prices of goods and services. As more and more firms attempt to penetrate foreign markets, they find themselves challenged by fierce competition from each other. Competition becomes intense, and each firm attempts to maximize its share of and presence in international markets. This leads to significant price cuts for consumers who benefit from competition. World prices are generally lower when domestic prices in goods are standardized. Good. Okay? Next question says that in macroeconomics, the economy can best be understood through the use of 1, money, 2, models, 3, pricing, and 4, debates. And so, I mean, an economist would see this and immediately go, models, right? That is, if you think about any micro or macro class you're taking, all you're learning about is models, right? You have our general supply and demand model, you have the production possibilities frontier model, you have, I don't know, the dynamic aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. They're all just different ways of simplifying the economy or the world around us into a controlled way for us to understand what influences what and what are the relationships between different factors that are existing in the economy, right? And so, yes, like it's important to understand money. Yes, it's important to understand pricing. Yes, it's important to debate. But the money is money in the context of models. The pricing is pricing in the context of models, and the debate is debate in the pricing or accuracy of models, right? So models is what we go back to, and so 2 is going to be the best answer here. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. They also said models. And they said that macroeconomics is the study of aggregate economic variables that concern the economy as a whole. It describes the structure, performance, and behavior of the entire economy by studying indicators such as national income, unemployment rate, price indices, etc. It is crucial for the determination of economic policies. Since macroeconomics deals with the economy as a whole, analyses cannot be performed by treating the entire economy as a laboratory or a test group. It is neither feasible nor possible. Any effort to do so can lead to severe wastages of economic resources. Hence, economic environments are mimicked through models representative of different sectors or economic institutions upon which tests are carried out and inferences are drawn. Economic models are simplified frameworks illustrative of a complex systems based on mathematics or logic supported by empirical evidence. Very good breakdown, very thorough. Yeah, nothing to really add there, so very good. Mark that as correct. Next question says, which best describes what a central bank uses monetary policy to do? 1 says, ensure the government has a balanced budget. 2, influence financial institutions globally. 3, ensure the government is sufficiently funded. Or 4, steer the economy away from recession and towards growth. So central bank for us is going to be the Fed, right, or Federal Reserve. And monetary policy is basically the tools which the Fed has to influence the economy. And so we know that's things like open market operations, the controlling the interest rates, the discount rate, etc. So what is the goal, the motivating principle behind the Fed's monetary policy? And so we know that the Fed is basically trying to accomplish a lot of the same things that government tries to accomplish through fiscal policy, and that is to lessen the impacts of the business cycle with its expansions and recessions, right? We want to, if we think the economy is too slow and it's in a recession, we want to use either monetary policy or fiscal policy to stimulate the economy so that it's going back to this recovery kind of period. And so that's going to be the motivating principle. Let's take a look at the answers. 1 says ensure the government has a balanced budget. That's going to be a concern of the legislative body, not the central bank. 2 says influence financial institutions globally. And again, that seems to imply that the Fed is somehow some sort of foreign policy kind of mechanism. I mean, international economies is going to be important when we're looking at monetary policy for sure, but it's not a motivating principle, right? It's just something to be considered. 3 says ensure the government is sufficiently funded. Again, that's concern of the legislative body, not the central bank. And 4, steer the economy away from recession towards growth, and that is something that we see the central banks constantly doing. In any recession, you'll see quantitative easing, you'll see a drop in interest rates, and so that's something that we'll definitely see being a motivating principle for the central bank. So 4 is the correct answer here. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. The previous tutor said 4, and they said the monetary policies adopted by the central bank, i.e. the monetary authority of an economy, that stabilize its financial system and retain the stability of prices in the market such that the economy is rescued from short-run fluctuations in the business cycle, such as a recession, and brought back to its long-run growth trend. When the economy encounters a recession due to depleting aggregate demand and plummeting business activity that erodes the profitability of various markets and increases unemployment, the central bank adopts expansionary monetary policy that focuses on increasing the money supply by enhancing the credit creation capacity of banks such that consumer spending and investment spending are increased and aggregate demand is encouraged to rescue the economy out of recession. That was quite the sentence, but yes, that is correct. And we're going to mark that as correct. Okay, next question. Which scenario is an example of cost-push inflation? A, consumers have more money to buy cars and the price of cars and car parts rises as a result. B, an increase in workers' wages raises the production cost of cars and car prices rise as a result. C, the demand for cars falls as consumers have less disposable income and car prices fall as a result. Or D, a government bailout helps car manufacturers lower their costs and car prices fall as a result. So there's two things that are happening here. One is that we know it's inflation, and two is that it's cost-push inflation. Inflation says that price is going up, right? Deflation is price going down. So if we know a price is going to rise as a result, then C and D are going to be incorrect, right? They're talking about prices falling. Left with A and B. And so A and B, this is going to come down to that second distinguishing factor, which is cost push as a causal factor for this inflation. And cost push inflation refers to a circumstance in which it's the costs of factors of production, that have gone up, which have caused the supply curve to shift to the left because suppliers have to reduce their quantity supplied at every price level. And that reduction, that leftward shift in supply is causing the price to go up. We can see that in a graph like this. Oops. Let's draw some more time. Demand, supply, and see we're saying there's a leftward shift because the cost of production has gone up. The leftward shift, and what do you know? We've got a new price level that's higher than the old price level. That's the cost push inflation. So which one of these best fits that scenario? A says consumers have more money to buy cars and the price of car and car parts rise as a result. That's entirely on the demand side, not the supply side. And so it's not going to be what we're expecting to see. B says an increase in workers' wages raises the production cost of cars and car prices rise as a result. We know that wages are a factor of production. The cost of production has gone up. Car prices go up because of a reduction in supply. That's exactly what we expect to see with cost push inflation. So B is the right answer here. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. So the previous tutor said that as we know, that inflation is a macroeconomic indicator which is used to know a continuous increase in price over a particular period in the economy. There are various types of inflation, but demand pull and cost push inflation are the most commonly used types. Cost push inflation is a type of inflation which increases due to an increase in the cost of production, like wages and raw material. So we can say that option B is the correct option. Great, that was a good answer, and we're going to mark that as correct. Next question says, which of the following is consistent with the law of demand? A, an increase in the price of juice causes no change in the quantity of juice demanded. B, a decrease in the price of a gallon of milk causes a decrease in the quantity of milk demanded. 3, an increase in the price of soda causes a decrease in the quantities of soda demanded. Or 4, an increase in the price of the tape causes an increase in the quantity of tapes demanded. So the law of demand tells us that as ceteris paribus, holding all else equal, as price goes up, quantity demand goes down. As price goes down, quantity demand goes up. We want to see an answer choice that reflects this trade-off or this inverse relationship. A says a decrease in the price of juice causes no change in quantity demanded. Not correct. B says a decrease in the price causes a decrease in the quantity of demanded. Incorrect. C says an increase in the price of soda causes a decrease in the quantity of soda demanded. That is correct. So that seems to be one that fits. And let's check 4. An increase in the price of tape causes an increase in the quantity of tapes demanded. Incorrect. So 3 is going to be the right answer here because it matches that inverse relationship. Price goes up, quantity goes down. Okay, let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. They also said 3 He said that the law of demand asserts an inverse relationship between the price of a good and its quantity demanded by stating that a decrease in the price of a good will cause the quantity demanded to increase, and an increase in the price will cause the quantity demanded to decrease. The inverse relationship is translated into a downward sloping demand curve on which a change in quantity demanded due to changes in price is reflected by a movement along the curve. An upward movement represents a decrease, and a downward movement represents an increase in the quantity demanded. A change in the demand due to factors that affect demand other than the price of the product leads to a shift in the curve and not a movement. If there is a decrease in the quantity of soda demanded due to an increase in its price, the law of demand is reflected. It's a pretty thorough explanation. Nothing to add there. I'll mark that as correct. Next set question says, which best explains how contractionary policies can hamper economic growth? 1 says they increase demand, 2 says they help increase consumer debt, 3 says they reduce disposable income, and 4 says they reduce consumer confidence. And so, what is contractionary economy? This is the aggregate demand, dynamic aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. So, let me draw this so it intersects. Yeah, there we go. This is supply, demand. This is short-run supply. This is long-run supply. Right? So this is a perfectly at equilibrium model for an aggregate demand, aggregate supply dynamic model. And what happens with contractionary policy is we would use it in a circumstance where we find D to be at D1. And so instead of having long-run supply of potential GDP being equal to a current GDP, we see that our current GDP is higher, right, than the long-run potential GDP. And so essentially the economy is producing too much. It's going to burn itself out, right? So what we want to see is that the economy is producing too much. It's leading to inflation. We want to decrease this. And how do we do that? We want contractionary policy. And the effect we want is basically return D1 to D. We want to bring it back here. And that would give us back to the long-run potential GDP that we see at the intersection of all three of the curves, short run, long run, and aggregate demand, right? And how do we do that? Well, there's several ways. We could increase taxes, right? If you increase taxes, then people have less money and they're going to spend less and consumption goes down, so the aggregate demand goes down. We could decrease government spending. We know that government spending leads to a multiplier effect where government spends $1 million, the $1 million goes into the private sector turns around and spends half of that, and so there's an amplifying effect there. If we decrease the amount that the government spends, then there's less kind of an injection of money into the economy, so that's another way. We can engage in monetary policy where we essentially decrease the interest rate, increase the interest rate. Decrease the interest rate. We decrease the interest rate so that there's going to be less borrowing for investment, and so overall demand is going to go down because people are not investing as much. And so all these ways are ways in which we would be trying to decrease or contract the economy. But they are all similar in the one thing, which is reduce disposable income. We want there to be less money in their that they can spend, and so that's how contractionary policy is going to hamper that growth. So C is going to be the best answer here. They reduce disposable income. Let's take a look at the previous two's answer. They also said 3, and they said that contractionary policy refers to the set of discretionary actions undertaken by the government or the monetary authority of an economy to reduce the level of aggregate demand and prevent the economy from overheating. A contractionary policy can either be fiscal or monetary. The government decreases its spending or increases the tax rate under contractionary fiscal policy, whereas the level of credit creation is reduced through open market sales or an increase in reserve requirements, federal funds rates, or discount rates under the contractionary monetary policy. When authorities go with a contractionary policy, the level of money that is available for consumers decreases, and the reduction in the money supply affects the level of aggregate demand adversely, causing the aggregate demand curve to shift to the left, right here, which leads to a reduction in the price level rate. Nothing really much to add there, and that's exactly what we are seeing when we do contractionary policy. Next question says, every economic decision has A, only positive benefits, B, gain opportunities, C, unavoidable limitations, or D, a consequence or trade-off. And so what we're really seeing here is some of the fundamental principles of economics here again, right? And what we know is that there's always going to be scarcity, And by definition, that means that we have to make choices. We can't have everything, right? And so this is the idea of opportunity cost, where my decision to do something means I give up my ability to do something else. Which one of these principles is best? Which one of these answer choices best matches those principles? Well, A says that it only has positive benefits. That's not true. You can make an economic decision that is technically the wrong decision that will give you negative benefits. You make the wrong choice. B says gained opportunities. I'm not really sure what that refers to. It doesn't seem central to an economic decision that you're trying to gain more opportunities, right? It's just simply how much utility you get from that decision. C says unavoidable limitations. This is true, but because we have scarcity, but it's not the way that's usually phrased in the principle of economics. So maybe there's a better answer choice here. And D says the consequence of trade-off, and this is such a better answer. When we have a decision, we're essentially always considering the trade-off or the opportunity cost of that decision. So D is going to be much more fundamentally core to the economic field than C. So D is going to be the correct answer here. We can take a look at the previous two's answer when they said that, as we know, the economic decision is about to decide on economic activity. The decision needs to be made due to a reason of scarce resources, which is known as scarcity. Scarcity is a situation where resources are limited and their use is unlimited. It's also limited. It should also be limited. In that case, each economic agent needs to be careful about these questions that are what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. So we can say each economic decision has a consequence of trade-off, therefore option B is the correct answer. Note that resources and their use are both limited, otherwise correct. But yeah, we mark that as correct as well. And so I believe that's all we have for today. So hopefully that was helpful. We'll be doing it again on Thursday. And again, hope everybody's staying healthy and safe at home. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody.